So, a reimagining of Marilyn Monroe's
Oh
life.
my God.
That's the
You
description.
said it was going to be good.
So,
Sorry,
what you
we're talking
guys
about his
think?
intro. His intro, he said he was going to be
Because
good.
you,
Nobody
you
said the movie was going to be good.
you ruined it.
Fine, keep going,
Again.
please.
We're rolling with this here.
We'll keep going. Start your intro again.
Okay, all right. A reimagining of Marilyn Monroe's life. That's what the description says. So, what did you guys think? Because they clearly didn't.
Okay.
All right.
You had to let me finish, George.
That played out better than I originally thought it would.
Well, you interrupted me. You're as bad
To
as
be
the people
fair,
who made this film.
I didn't think you were going to go for a joke. I thought you were just, describing what the movie is described as.
Yeah.
Give me about 5 seconds, so.
All right, next time you ask to do an intro 3 seconds before we start recording, I will give you more than 5 seconds leeway.
You gotta give me the benefit of the. Wait, was it
This is especially good because you're hosting next
Dominic
week.
did not give to Marilyn Monroe.
This is Ben. That worked out especially well because you're hosting next week, so I'm going to ask to do an intro at the last minute. So yeah, we're talking about Blonde tonight.
Yep.
It's
a film.
It's definitely one of the movies we've seen.
That is a good description of it, honestly. It is one of the movies that we've
Normally when you watch these films, I always think, all right, maybe one of us is going to have like a positive or more positive opinion. And while watching this one over 1 month, because it was tough to watch in one sitting, I just kept thinking, man, this is probably one of the most painful experiences of my life.
This is immediately into the category of what should have been the category for Venom 2, what is the category for Home Team, Morbius, probably Elvis.
I want to be more clear than that. Like,
but
Elvis,
it's lower.
Elvis did fine, but all these movies, like Elvis, was
staying alive.
A sort of lame, like low effort adaptation of his life. It didn't really delve too deep. This movie is much worse, mainly because its whole point is, in the eyes of the director, I guess, the people that made this film, is, well, we want to, make a film about like Marilyn, and I guess how much, terrible exploitation she had in Hollywood. But really, all you did was you took her legacy and you put her into a Saw style like movie where every single scene is just emotionally draining for her. Every single scene is horrible. You need to go through so much shit, and half of it didn't happen.
I think at this point, Ben, you bring up a good point. We said that we needed to stress this as many times as possible during this episode. Blonde is a work of fiction. There is a disclaimer at the end of the credits, which I was surprised they included.
At the end,
saying,
not at the beginning.
You can't
people can watch this film.
It's like we talked about on the Amsterdam episode, when it said most of this stuff actually happened, or I'm paraphrasing, I'm sure. Blonde.
No, that's actually
that's exactly what it said.
There are going to be, I would guess, at least a third of the viewers of this film, maybe half, will start watching it and believe that over the next 2 hours and 47 minutes, they will see exactly, conversation with fetus and all, what happened in Marilyn Monroe's life.
Yeah. And can I honestly say one thing? Even if we just accept okay, this is a fictional story or whatever, what is the point that the story is going for? Because here's the thing. I feel like I just witnessed 2.5 hours of a woman suffering in the most horrible ways imaginable, and I don't get why. What was the point?
Yeah, it's using, it's trying to create a psychological drama using the real life person Marilyn Monroe as a fictional character. And
But
This
not
isn't
in a fictional
even
character.
so realistically that you think it's real, but it's not. Like, yeah.
In my opinion, this is a work of self-indulgent art. They were so fascinated with the horrors of Marilyn Monroe that it wasn't enough for them, and they wanted to portray it on screen in as graphic detail as possible.
That's a good
So what
description.
you're saying is they were so preoccupied with whether they could, they didn't stop to think whether they should.
This is a film that's based on a book, right? And I looked at a description of the author. I'm forgetting her name.
Joyce Carol Oates.
Yeah,
Joyce Carol
Joyce
Oates.
Carol Oates.
You
that-
read a headline about a New Yorker article. Thank you, George. Thank you.
You butchered the line, but I understood the reference.
So she said she was researching, and it was supposed to be like 175 pages or something, but she was just so fascinated with the world of Marilyn, and I wasn't done with her yet. And that was the most ridiculous line I've ever heard. You weren't done with her. You're taking this woman's life. I don't care that you're trying to show exploitation. As soon as you go into fiction and start using
You're
fictionalized,
making things up based on
you are making
rumors.
things up that are horrible, that you say happened to her and show on screen. What kind of respect are you giving to her legacy?
None.
Aside from that, this film sucks as a film. You've got the black and white color.
Yeah,
changed. I looked it up, and I sent you guys this. He said, "Oh no, it doesn't have anything to do with the story." He was just they're fictionalizing things by looking at photographs, right? That's where they're coming up with all these stories and grand ideas. And they said, well, yeah, when we looked at one of these photographs that we based it on, if it was black and white, it would be black and white. If it was color, it would be color. That is the most ridiculous thing I've heard. High school
when we
level
did
sophistication.
when we did the episode on Honk for Jesus, I pointed out the aspect ratio changed when you were in documentary versus the fictional film. This film changes color, saturation, either color or black and white, and aspect ratio on a whim. There is no rationale for the changes.
Like
They do it whenever they want. It has no meaning whatsoever.
It's possible they're trying to be like disorienting or something like that, but it's not.
But
like...
you can do that in a way that isn't stupid.
Yes, thank you.
There's no story.
There's no story.
Nightmare.
Nightmare.
Can I be like honest with you? Like the thing about the film is it's so preoccupied with Marilyn Monroe suffering that like why would this woman choose to be an actress, or why would this woman like choose to even meet with John F. Kennedy if he's just it's like it has Marilyn Monroe doing things, just it removes like plot so they can show more suffering of this woman. And
the only plot was her being in these relationships with all these men and calling them daddy because of her issues with her father. Like that's the only common thread throughout the entire film, other than the fact that they wanted to show that her life sucked and they couldn't go 20 seconds without hammering it into the audience's brain that her life was awful and we're never going to let you forget it. And it's like, that is awful.
I mean, and we get it right from the jump too. The scene with her as a young child with her mother in a fire.
Big fiction there.
And then 2 minutes later, her mother tries to fucking drown her. Like,
it's violent. Like, I mean, and it's luckily, of course, the film is so thematic that this scene of this child like being nearly drowned to death really feels necessary to the story. Oh wait, no, it doesn't. It's
never going to be addressed again.
Like
she's going to go visit her infirm mother like an hour later. And they're not going to address it at all. Also,
her dad is this like elusive figure. I mean, like I was genuinely expecting like, oh, it's gonna end with like her on set with Clark Gable and like some sort of resolution.
You had way too much. You had way too much hope for this movie.
I didn't expect that at all. I thought she would die.
Like
We got that.
the only part that I sort of liked was her scenes, some of her scenes with Arthur Miller, because it's like the one time where the film decides to not like just torture her on screen and have her have at least a semi-good relationship.
They have a horrible like portrayal of everyone else. They purposefully, I'm sure, do not mention them by name as Joe DiMaggio or Arthur Miller or John F. Kennedy.
Arthur Miller is mentioned. There's a title card, or like a newspaper headline.
Wow.
Marilyn Monroe and Arthur Miller to get married.
Okay.
He's the only one, though, I think. Everyone else has like another.
Joe DiMaggio is first of all, you've got Bobby Cannavale playing Joe DiMaggio. You've got Adrian Brody playing Arthur Miller. These are two really, really good actors. And we'll talk about Ana de Armas, I'm sure, at length. Because her performance is probably the only positive you can take from this film. But those two actors taking, 15-minute chunks of the film where you're just going to see how they had a really negative impact on Marilyn Monroe. We're not going to really address it because once we've gotten into the meat of their relationship, we're on to the next thing. And whether it's going from Joe DiMaggio to Arthur Miller or going from Arthur Miller to a miscarriage on the beach, it's, for a movie that is so bloated at 2 hours and 47 minutes, it doesn't really stop to think about anything. Like the pacing is atrocious for a movie this long.
It's a soft film, man. It's more concerned with showing suffering than explaining or even talking about anything. It's just terrible. I mean,
but at least we had a dozen cuts of the scene on the subway grate. A dozen cuts of the exact same shot.
I get the idea that it's trying
to counted
Joe DiMaggio coming in like
it's
fuck you. What do you think?
Doesn't I know he's supposed it's so obviously Joe DiMaggio's behavior is abhorrent, but also why would anyone act that way?
It's not confirmed. Like no one knows. You're just using all these people. You got every member everywhere. They're all terrible people. It's all, mostly fiction. No one even said this shit. It's like, okay, maybe it could have happened. But you have no reason to think that. Maybe. None.
I want to talk for a minute about the viewing experiences because I know Ben and I had a much different viewing experience than Max and Declan. Ben and I spread this thing out. He watched it over a month. I watched it over about a day and a half in probably 7 or 8 different viewing periods, none longer than half an hour. Max and Declan watched it straight through. To my knowledge.
I didn't watch it straight through. I watched it over like 2 days, I should say.
Oh, well then.
Oh, then it was just me.
Max, I want to hear what this film is like all in a row.
Please.
To be honest, if we want to get technical about it, I also did not watch it all in a row.
Oh my God.
I walked away from it at various points to like go to the bathroom and I didn't pause it. But other than that, I did watch it all the way through. And you know what? I think that's about what I could do. If I had to go see this movie in a theater,
I wouldn't.
I would very much struggle to do that. But I think, look, it's a long ass movie, right? It's almost 250. Like that's a lot to get through. And like George said, everything happens in like 30-second increments. It feels like something new will happen every minute.
That is true, but then you get moments like the subway grate, which they hold on for a goddamn hour. Feels that way, obviously not.
They focus on like some of the worst aspects, like some of the moments that they want to stick on, like the subway grate,
the miscarriage,
that leads into Joe DiMaggio abusing her, right? Or you have the scene with her and John Kennedy lasts
That-
interminably long.
Oh my
So
god.
long.
Yeah. Like I know it's supposed to be
uncomfortable
uncomfortable
to
but
watch.
Like
Christ.
it's supposed to be these heightened and
I just-
to use one of Declan's words from earlier, disorienting feelings, and that's fine, right? But there's just so many of them that it's like, okay, you can do that, but you also have to have some meat around it. You
Mhm.
have to have something that actually makes those scenes powerful and not just disturbing for the sake of being disturbing, right? Like we can all agree that let's disregard whether or not or like how accurate this film is.
Mhm.
And
Say
it is
all
not a
it is
biopic.
not, but
It
say
is fiction.
say everything in this movie happened exactly the way that it did, right?
Mhm.
You need to be able to sit with these moments and think about them so that it's not just like this complete trauma dump of horrible things that happen. Like you
Mhm.
need to be able to contextualize it. You need to be able to actually build a story around these things. You can't just pummel your audience with abuse and negligence. That's not how you tell a story. And that's the huge issue with this film is that that's all this film is.
Mhm.
It's just we're
feel-
gonna show you that her life was awful and people hated her.
I
They're
feel
building on that.
obligated now as an aspiring filmmaker to
Mhm.
make a Marilyn Monroe biopic, which is not a sentence I ever thought I'd say, but
Oh, no,
I
I'm
feel a need
get
for
far away from that.
for her life story to be better known than through this film.
Yeah.
Well,
And-
George, to be fair, there have been plenty of Marilyn Monroe documentaries, films. I mean, this is just one of them.
There's a Marilyn Monroe documentary on Netflix
yeah,
right
there's a
now.
Marilyn Monroe documentary that was released like this year, I think.
Mhm.
I should watch that
That's
then.
another thing. There's been as many Marilyn Monroe, stuff as Jeffrey Dahmer. I just think some of this stuff should be left alone rather than self-indulgent
It's a weird
Yeah.
comparison.
material.
Yeah.
But the thing that I was going to follow up on with Max is it's okay to have a film that's really depressing and filled with trauma.
Mhm.
12 Years a Slave, I think. It's a tough film to watch.
Mhm.
It is also based on a true story. They obviously do a lot better job with the accuracy of that.
Mhm.
But it has its ups and downs. It has its moments of levity. He's got two slave masters, obviously not an ideal situation, but one of them is definitely better than the other.
Mhm.
You have a different you have levels of pain, and then obviously, he starts at the top too.
This is pain throughout.
It's pain throughout, but it goes through levels, and there are moments of levity. There are moments that even him as a slave can enjoy, and the audience can reflect back and wow, so he's enjoying himself here. He used to be, this really rich guy. It leaves you with something to think about. Whereas it's just torture. That's what I'm saying. It's a Saw film. Because all it is torture. There's nothing to think about.
Yeah.
You have some philosophical way to phrase it, but it's just torture.
Yeah. I think it feels almost not infuriating, but annoying. It's in that this film is sold on this idea of oh, Ana de Armas playing Marilyn Monroe. Oh, that's interesting. I want to see how she does. And I feel like she does great, but it's not that there's no story. The story they chose to tell is one of just incomprehensible misery. And so it's why do it this way? To talk about Ana de Armas, because I think we should. I feel like she does a great job. It's just he completely misuses her.
Yeah.
It just has her in pain.
Yeah.
I think her performance, and you're right, Declan, we should get into this.
Mm-hmm.
She does a great job with what she's given.
Mm-hmm.
And what she's given is not much in terms of script, in terms of story, in terms of how she's presented on screen. She looks the part. She looks like Marilyn Monroe in the film.
There are
hair
some
and makeup
shots.
did a great job.
Yeah.
Her accent mostly good, mostly goes away. to capture Marilyn's iconic voice.
It's a tough one to get rid of, though, and a tough one to mimic while you're trying to get rid of her fairly thick accent. So I'm gonna give her a pass on that.
I think she does probably as good of a job as we could expect, knowing her career pedigree and knowing what she had to do.
Certainly, like keeping the lip open and stuff. But the thing that I will say is, it is weird to see someone using very clearly the iconic stuff that Marilyn Monroe would do in front of the cameras to portray mostly her personal life. We don't get to really see her as a star, which is primarily when she would probably talk and stuff. I mean, most of the actors back in those days, they train themselves to talk certain ways, to be a certain person in front of the film. There are plenty of accounts, even from Joe DiMaggio, of like what Marilyn Monroe was like behind closed doors, and they don't seem to care about that at all. It's weird to use her public persona as a backdrop to all this personal drama. Half of it's made up, but every time you see her public facing, and Ben, this is a point you brought up earlier, you're immediately brought into the trauma.
Well,
and you're seeing her bring this repressed.
When we watched Elvis, I mean, clearly he had his drug problems and he's got terrible, really dark scenes there too. But
they didn't show Elvis dying on the shitter. They showed Marilyn's death at the end of this film,
and that is kind of fucked up. But it's probably one of the most fucked up parts about it, because have some respect, man.
I mean, you're gonna see a film like, one of the best biopics of the last 10 years, Bohemian Rhapsody. You're ending at the absolute peak at Live Aid, and then you're gonna have, title cards at the beginning of the end credits saying, "Here's how everything else went down. Freddie passed away in 1991." This is how a biopic generally ends. And again, this film is not a biopic, but there's no way of, there's almost no redemption at the end of this quasi story.
That was also like an accurate way of how she died. Like that's what was reported. Like that's what's in the autopsy reports. That's what's in the newspaper clippings from like what we have, right? There's obviously still some speculation and it's not 100% certain, but that's the most accurate we get to like confirmed history in the film.
But to show it on screen, and Ben, you hit the nail on the head, it's disrespectful.
It's like, what you have to ask yourself as a filmmaker, what is important to put on the screen? Is it death of drugs really that important? Do we really think that the audience doesn't know how horrible that is? What's gonna happen? It's just self-indulgent, and I think that's the word that I would use to describe most of this film. I feel bad because Ana de Armas clearly did a lot of work, and she does a very good job with the material. It's just fortunate that the material is so frankly exploitative, like it's apparently trying to portray, and disrespectful. There's nothing respecting the legacy of Marilyn Monroe. I mean, everyone knows the horrors that has happened in Hollywood. To resurrect that on a film for your own benefit, essentially.
Yeah, the novel Blonde, the novel Blonde was written for Joyce Carol Oates to, I guess, make herself feel good about, writing this story about Marilyn Monroe. The film that we are talking about tonight is very much the same way as an adaptation of the book. It's about the fiction.
Well, it's even worse though, because it's that much more removed from reality, right? Like, yes, we have Marilyn Monroe's real life. Then you have Joyce Carol Oates sort of, she probably did exploit, she expanded, and there was exposition there that she added, right, in the book. But then you have this other level of turning a 700-page book, which is Joyce Carol Oates, into a 2-hour and 47-minute movie that comes out, I don't know, what, 20 or 30 years after. I don't know when the book was written, but
I mean, it came out 60 years after Marilyn died.
Mm.
And sure, you can make a biopic of someone who lived.
There's degrees of separation there, is all I'm saying.
You can make a biopic of someone who lived 100 years ago, 200 years ago. I mean, in 2012, we got a biopic about Abraham Lincoln. And, Lincoln had died almost 150 years earlier. So there is precedent to telling the life story of someone who, is not known by anyone currently living. And I'm not saying 60 years is, a long stretch by any stretch of the imagination.
Between willing creation of fiction and using what you have to create the most accurate, at least what you believe the most accurate representation. And Hollywood always, extends that. They fictionalize some parts, they add in some things. But I mean, even of the worst biopics, the worst in terms of like really changing the story, I've never seen anything like this. That willingly creates stuff like the abortions.
Let's talk about it.
Abortions, but no one knows. And to put it on display in a film like this twice.
Well, the abortion. Let's talk about the abortion scene. Let's talk about the scene in the garden, and let's talk about the scene on the beach.
Can I be real about something? Like just to be honest, in this.
Wait, I didn't get the alert. Is it time to be real?
In this current environment, I'm so glad that the film decided to depict depict abortion in such like a exploitative and horrifying manner as something that's forced on people that they have no autonomy over. That's
sarcastic?
That's exactly what we need. What?
Are you being sarcastic?
Yes, I'm being sarcastic.
Okay, that wasn't clear.
I honestly
Your
felt
voice is
like,
the same,
I mean, even I like to be no, just it just felt so like it was already in
yes, it was very messed up,
but it feels even more messed up now,
But after that, you get the scene of her with the fetus from 2001: Space Odyssey.
More like a space oddity. Shout out Bowie. But yeah, let's talk the abortion, which is just, again, in a movie that's filled with scenes that are hard to watch. Watching her, almost be restrained to a table and then running into
I changed my mind.
Yeah,
running through hospital hallways.
Fuck, man.
It's first of all, it's super preachy for anti-abortion, and second of all, again, the respect of Marilyn Monroe. Why show it? If it's a part of her story, just mention it.
Also, because it didn't happen. No one said that this happened. So why are you making it such a big deal through the film?
Then you got this
Chaplin and the fucking throuple that never happened either. It didn't matter through the entire movie. It didn't fucking happen. How are you gonna make her entire story and her inspiration for everything about things that never fucking happened? It's just dumb. And it's disrespectful, but more than that, it's infuriating.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the scene in the garden, and this scene was leaked on Twitter basically right after the movie was released on Netflix a month ago or so, a month and a half ago. And I saw it on Twitter, and I thought it was fake. I was like, there's no fucking way that this is a real scene in this movie. There's no way that they're going to have Ana de Armas sitting in a garden, cutting to a CGI, animated fetus, and they're going to have a conversation about an abortion that had happened. There's no way. I could not believe that was going to be a real scene. And then I saw it today, and I was kind of expecting it if I'm being honest, I was kind of expecting it to be real. I was like, all right, this movie's bad enough that we will see that scene. And I barely remember the dialogue. But then when I watched it, I was like, oh my God, it is so much worse than I remembered. And it's just, I get it. You don't like people having abortions because you're fucked up in the head. But why do you gotta communicate it with a child voice actor projecting voice through an animated fetus? I'm gonna have nightmares about that voice.
The other thing was, as I looked it up because I was curious if she had any documented abortions. No, she didn't. Obviously, it's entirely possible. It could have happened. Who knows, right? But the bigger thing was she had 3 miscarriages with Arthur Miller. None of them were the scene on the beach.
Yeah, the scene on the beach was.
That was a stupid scene. I was like, wait a minute, you're telling me she fell in the beach? She got a miscarriage?
Sand and
that happened to anyone.
And then suddenly there's blood, and then suddenly there's a lot of blood.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
and then a few minutes later, you're seeing her having that dream sequence, and she's waking up and she's covered in blood.
But just to finish my thought, with the abortions and the conversation with the fetus blaming her and making, guilt tripping her and stuff. I looked it up and she did have the miscarriages, and it seemed like she really wanted to have a child. So I just kept thinking, man, so you're respecting her story again by having these moments where she's guilty for killing her child when she really just wanted to have one, and there's no documented abortions anywhere. It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Why not? You're gonna fictionalize an aspect of her life. Give her a kid.
Yeah. Why not? Give her a father.
Like, yeah.
If you're making up the story, first of all, why not just write a story about a woman who's got all this trauma? Why do you have to make it
a real
Marilyn
person?
Monroe?
Go watch Last Night in Soho. I thought it was a pretty good film, and it sort of covers these notes without being horrific. Being a real person. It has the horror, but I mean, you'll see. Like, if you watch it, you'll see. But it's a lot more of a. You do that if you want to tell a story. Use your own imagination and fiction. Don't use someone else's.
And even more specifically, don't go out of your way to try to perfectly recreate the other person. Like I'm gonna be real. If I made a fictionalized story about one of you guys, but also have you guys be a serial killer, but then still include scenes where the actor looks exactly like you, that would be kind of messed up. And that would still, even if it's a fictional story, that would still be impugning on your guy's image.
Speaking of which, Arthur Miller did.
All right, Declan, clear your hard drive, please.
Arthur Miller wrote a play in 1964, essentially about Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
But
there are hints of that.
Maggie and stuff like that. Yeah. And it's very clearly a personal play, not very well received by critics, but yeah, he did that.
I listened to it. I thought it was an okay play. I mean, it's no Death Salesman, but
how in the world,
what is?
That's probably as close as you could get. Okay, a personalized play from someone who was fucking married to Marilyn Monroe. But even that wasn't really critically well received. But how are you going to do something and use your actual name and do all this shit? Even Arthur Miller had respect to do that.
You talk about a moment that's completely, passed over to move on to the next, onto the next, onto the next. Marilyn finding the script on the typewriter with an exact conversation. That could have been a big moment, but instead they moved on to the next scene.
Yeah.
This is nothing actually comes
chamber.
It's the closest thing to a betrayal Arthur Miller does, but it doesn't build on it. So it just feels like, oh, Marilyn's too tragically broken now that she can't do this relationship with Arthur Miller. There's no point to even introducing the scene. But then again, there's no point to even introduce Arthur Miller because there was nothing good about Marilyn's life at all. So, like, you know, why even show her even somewhat happy?
And you don't even see, you know, there are a couple of moments when you see her on a film set, just a couple peppered into the film to say, yeah, Marilyn Monroe was in the movies, but we don't actually see that as a part of her life.
All the premieres, she's fucking crying. It's like, oh God, this is terrible. I gotta close my eyes. Please get me out of here. It's like this is,
and then it cuts. Next scene,
premiere, man.
It shows her on Some Like It Hot, one for most well-received films of all time, and she's like, I hate this movie. Like, and
well, there's also the whole.
Hot is actually the most accurate part because Billy Wilder said, yeah, she was heavily on drugs.
Oh, okay.
Taking care of her from Hollywood, taking care of her.
Well, then you've got the sequence.
And he was friends with Arthur Miller, and he told Arthur to talk to her, but. Obviously.
Also, shout out to the character actor who played Billy Wilder. He looks fucking identical to him.
Pretty good, Billy Wilder.
Yeah, like if that was Billy Wilder's son, I would believe it.
It looked like it just came out of the fucking
like honestly.
I'll be shocked if it were a deep
with that.
But then you've got, like, by comparison, the scene where she's complaining about her salary for Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. And it's like another moment that could have been really dramatic and really, you know, powerful for her character.
And those are the scenes you should have focused on, like a good, talented woman who's just trying to earn her paycheck, rather than like every moment is pain. It's too much. She has no room to be proud of who she is and the icon she is. So what respect are you giving when she's got no good moments? The film,
like it's all trauma without even like any actual exploration of the trauma. Like it depicts her like getting seen as like a man literally like assaulting her like in an audition, like without even saying anything. But then that doesn't like that, like even like it's just there, and then just moves on to the next trauma. I mean, we repeat it over and over again, but like actually do something with it if you're going to tell a story. Like maybe have her deal with, I don't even know, like just nothing.
Have to deal with depression and drugs. Like they seem to really indulge in showing the horrors of it, but not really. Like there's plenty of stories of, you know, what happened behind closed doors. I don't know how accurate they are, but they're at least more accurate than literally making things up. And quite honestly, it is better to focus on those, because that would be when you're out of the limelight. If you're trying to show her personal struggles, don't just show her miserable at every high-profile thing. This doesn't even make any sense. She would. There are stories of her spending days in, you know, bed because she was fucking depressed. It's like you could easily do things like that. They have no interest in apparently giving a fair portrayal of her. Yes, she had her terrible circumstances, but she was an icon. I'm sure she had good moments.
There were good moments.
She was an actress. Like, there's nothing positive about becoming a famous actress. It was all misery. Like, come on.
Well, but I mean, it's not even that though, right? Like what Ben said when he was talking about 12 Years a Slave in this film, right? It's okay to have a film that can be sad, that can be filled with miserable moments, that can highlight the fact that, yeah, her life did suck, right? Like she was in the limelight. She was seen as a sex symbol, right? You can talk about her being exploited by the industry, by her fans, by the people around her. You can do that. But you have to do it in a way that actually connects and makes sense. This is just doing it for the sake of doing it.
And
this is exploiting the exploitation.
Yes.
Any fucking human that would have gone through whatever they made her go through would have died a long time ago. It is evidence that she didn't literally kill herself, that clearly there were some moments of happiness. Yes, it is. I'm sure Hollywood has abused so many people. But if you ask any of them, I'm sure they had. It's not all terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, she was an icon, so I'm sure she enjoyed some nights and she didn't others.
To paraphrase,
no variability there. You have no honest, even attempt to show what a human would be like in those circumstances.
To paraphrase
does
the YouTuber Be Kind Rewind, there's a reason people like Marilyn Monroe, you know? It's like there's something to her, but not according to this movie. Like
well, I mean, obviously people found her. I'm more saying like she
Yeah. Sorry, my point was tangential to your point, but I agree with what you're saying.
And they seem to not enjoy at all like any relationship with Arthur Miller or Joe DiMaggio, two people that I believe most people think that she had real good relationships with. I don't know what happened personally, but it seems like not concerned at showing any good moments from those relationships even. It seems so concerned with showing absolutely nothing good in her life.
It was just misery.
What's the point of that?
It was 36 years of misery.
36 years
and that's the message that they wanted to convey by telling this fictional story, was that Marilyn Monroe's life sucked.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm sure parts of that concept are true. I'm sure there were moments in her life that sucked.
But again, like I mentioned Elvis, even if it wasn't my favorite film, at least it had the brains to realize that yes, Elvis enjoyed some of his time out there. He wasn't like, oh God, everything's horrible all the fucking time, taking drugs, being abused. Like, what the hell, man?
Yeah.
No one can survive that. It is inhuman.
So I got nothing left to say about this one.
Yeah.
I will easily add it to the not gonna watch again folder.
Massive waste of a great performance.
I mean, there are plenty of movies that are a massive waste of a great performance. This is a massive waste of an audience member's time.
Yes.
This is 2 hours and 47 minutes that you're not going to get back. Usually I would end the episode by saying Blonde is streaming on Netflix. You can watch it, but it is the full, wholehearted recommendation of everyone on this panel. Don't. Spend 2 hours and 47 minutes on the phone with a loved one. Or
if you're curious about Marilyn Monroe, go watch a documentary of her or something, but at least something that attempts to be,
And you know what? If this movie were an hour 45 instead of 2:47, it wouldn't have been great either.
True.
All right. We are throwing the hosting chair around for the next month. I will have an episode in there. We're going to play Funky Films later this month. Ben's hosting next week. We got Max in a couple weeks. Declan's hosting at the end of the month. So we're all throwing it around. We're all going to have some fun with this. Banshees of Inisherin next week. So that's another Ben's choice. Ben's hosting.
That film takes place in Mexico, right?
Yeah, Mexico. Actually, I think
that's what I got from the poster.
Colombia, actually.
I'm gonna be ready for a lot of jokes like that next week.
All right, maybe not too many, but
Declan's gonna skip next week. All right, good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
See you later.